The coffee at the Tim Hortons on Elgin Street was never quite right. Too burnt in the morning, too watery by afternoon. But Nora Ashby had been coming here every Thursday for 11 years, and she wasn't about to change that now. She sat across from the man her sister had set her up with, a guy named Douglas something, and watched him calculate the tip on his phone. Not rough math in his head, his phone. A dedicated app, apparently, with a slider. 15%, he announced, as though he'd solved something. Nora smiled and said it was thoughtful of him. She drove home in the dark and called her sister from the driveway and said, kindly but firmly, no more setups. The thing was, Nora Ashby was 44 years old, ran a digital infrastructure consulting firm that operated across 4 provinces and billed north of $20 million a year, and she had spent the better part of a decade being treated like a woman who needed to be grateful for men who calculated 15% on an app. She wasn't angry about it anymore. She was just tired. The testing had started 3 years earlier, almost by accident. She'd been at a fundraiser, the kind her firm sponsored annually, a gala for a children's literacy foundation in Ottawa, and she'd arrived late, changed in the car, left her good coat in the trunk. A man at her table had spent most of the evening talking down to her in the particular way. Men talk down to women they've decided are decorative. When the silent auction results came in and her name appeared at the top of 3 different items, totaling just over $14,000, something shifted in his face. He'd leaned over and said, "Oh, I didn't realize." Nora had excused herself and not come back. She told the story to her business partner, Agnes, the next morning. Agnes, who had been married for 22 years and had strong opinions about most things, said, "So test them first." Nora had laughed. Agnes had not. The idea was simple enough. On any first date, Nora would arrive as herself, just not the whole self. No mention of the firm. No mention of the portfolio. She drove her old Civic, the one she'd bought in her 30s that she genuinely had no reason to replace. She wore her everyday clothes, not the ones she wore to board meetings. She let the conversation go wherever it went, and waited to see what kind of man she was actually sitting across from. 26 men over 3 years. The results had not been encouraging. Some lost interest when they figured out, or thought they figured out, that she wasn't going anywhere financially. 2 had been openly condescending about her little consulting thing. 1 had asked, with genuine concern, whether she'd considered upgrading her car before winter. A handful had been perfectly pleasant, but had drifted away after the 2nd or 3rd date when nothing flashy materialized. She hadn't stopped believing in people exactly. She'd just stopped being surprised. She met Gordon Calloway at a neighborhood hardware store on a Saturday in March. This was not a setup. Agnes didn't know about it. There was no strategy involved. Nora had gone in looking for a specific kind of weather stripping for her back door and had spent 12 minutes in the wrong aisle before a man at the end of the row said, without looking up from whatever he was reading on the shelf label, "Weather stripping's 1 aisle over, left side, middle shelf." She said, "Thank you." He said, "The labeling in here is genuinely terrible." She agreed that it was. His name, she learned eventually, was Gordon Calloway. He was 53, with gray at his temples and a small scar on his chin, and the kind of hands that suggested he actually used them for things. He was wearing a canvas jacket that had seen better decades, and work boots that were functional rather than fashionable. He was there, he explained, because the downspout on the north side of his house had been giving him trouble since October. They ended up talking for 20 minutes in the aisle, about downspouts and weather stripping, and then somehow about the neighborhood, which had changed considerably in the last decade. He didn't mention what he did for a living. Neither did she. They were just 2 people in a hardware store on a Saturday, and it felt so ordinary and unremarkable that Nora almost didn't notice she was enjoying herself. When they reached the cash register at the same time, Gordon paid for his brackets and stepped aside to wait while she found her card, and he didn't make a thing of it in either direction. Didn't offer to pay for her $6 worth of weather stripping, but also didn't make a performance of not offering. He was just standing there, reading the back of a paint brochure someone had left on the counter. In the parking lot, he asked if she wanted to get a coffee sometime. Not dinner, not a drink. Coffee sometime, as though it were genuinely optional. She said yes. They met the following Wednesday at a cafe on Bank Street that neither of them had been to before, which felt neutral in a way that suited both of them. Gordon was already there when she arrived, reading something on his phone with the same focused expression he'd had in the hardware store, like a man who was accustomed to waiting and didn't find it particularly remarkable. He put his phone away when she sat down. Nora noticed that. The conversation moved the way good conversations do, without a visible destination, stopping to look at things along the way. He asked about her work in the way people ask when they're genuinely curious rather than sizing something up, and she gave him her standard answer: consulting, digital systems, infrastructure. He nodded and didn't push, and she found that she almost wanted him to. She asked about him. "I do some investment work," he said, "property mostly. A few other things." He said it the way someone describes a job they've had long enough that it doesn't feel remarkable anymore. She asked if he liked it. He thought about that for a moment. "I like problems," he said finally. "Most investment is just problems in different packaging." She laughed, and he looked mildly pleased, and they ordered a second cup of coffee without either of them suggesting it. They just both kept sitting there, and eventually the server came by. When the bill came, Gordon reached for it without ceremony, glanced at it, and put his card down. Nora said, "Let me split it." He said, "I asked you so." Not possessive, not a statement about anything. Just cause and effect. She let it go. In her car afterward, she sat for a moment before starting the engine. She couldn't identify what felt different. He hadn't done anything remarkable. He'd just been present, fully, without performing it. They had coffee 3 more times before Gordon suggested dinner, and by the time they sat down in a mid-range Italian place on Spark Street, Nora had started to notice things that she hadn't let herself notice in a long time. He remembered what she'd said 2 weeks earlier about a project she'd been frustrated with. Not the details, just that she'd been frustrated, and he asked, how did that turn out? She'd had to think for a moment about what he was referring to, because no one had followed up on something she'd said 2 weeks ago in a while. He was also, she noticed, consistently understated in a way that felt earned rather than performed. He didn't talk about himself much. When he did, it was usually to say something self-deprecating and accurate. He mentioned once that he'd made a significant business decision in his 40s that had nearly cost him everything, and then he'd made another decision that hadn't, and that the difference between the two had mostly been luck. And he didn't think pretending otherwise helped anyone. "Most people who are successful," he said, "spend a lot of energy making sure you know they deserved it. I'm not sure any of us deserve it as much as we say we do." Nora had looked at him across the table and thought, "Who are you?" At dinner, Gordon ordered a mid-range pasta and water, glanced at the wine list briefly and closed it. She'd half expected, without quite admitting she was testing anything, that a man who did investment work might reach for the expensive bottle. He did not. He asked if she wanted wine. She said she was fine. He said he was too, and that was that. The bill came. He paid. She said, "Gordon, I can. I know you can," he said pleasantly. "I've got it." She said, "You've paid every time." He said, "I know. I'll let you know when it bothers me." She drove home thinking that she could not figure out what he wanted, and that this was, in its own way, the most interesting thing that had happened to her in years. The conversation she had not been prepared for happened on their 5th meeting. A Sunday afternoon walk along the Rideau Canal in early April, when the ice had gone soft and the light came in sideways, and everything smelled like cold water and mud. They'd been talking about something inconsequential, a neighborhood they'd both lived in at different times, when Gordon's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something crossed his face. Not alarm, just a quiet shift. "That's my son," he said. Can I just take this?" She said, "Of course." He stepped a few feet away. She didn't try to hear, but she could hear the tone of his voice. Steady, patient, the particular calm of a parent working hard not to make something worse. She heard him say, "It's okay, bud. You don't have to explain the whole thing right now. I'll be there by 4. He came back and said, "I'm sorry, I have to go. Is everything all right?" He paused in the particular way of a man deciding what to say. "My son is 17, he said. "He has a hard time sometimes. I like to be there. No excess detail. No performance of sacrifice." Nora said, "Go." He went. She stood on the path by the canal for a while after his car had pulled away, watching the water where the ice had broken into pale gray shelves. She thought about the way his voice had sounded on the phone. Not the voice of someone managing a situation, but someone actually present in it. She called Agnes that evening. "I think I might be in trouble," she said. Agnes said, "Finally." She told him on a Thursday evening in late April, in the kitchen of her house on Glebe Avenue, which was the first time he'd been inside it. She had not planned to tell him there, or then. She'd been thinking for 2 weeks about how to do it, in a neutral location, with some distance built in, giving him room to react without it meaning anything permanent. But they were standing in her kitchen, and he was helping her find a corkscrew. And he made a remark about her not having much kitchen stuff for someone who clearly knew what they were doing, and she'd looked around the kitchen. The good knives, the copper pan her mother had given her, the drawer full of equipment she'd accumulated over 20 years of actually cooking, and she thought, this is not a woman with not much kitchen stuff. This is a woman who has been careful about what she shows. She said, "Gordon, I need to tell you something." He found the corkscrew and held it out to her and said, "Okay," she told him, not all of it at once. She started with the firm, with what it actually was, with the revenue, with the portfolio. She watched his face as she talked. He was listening the way he always listened, which was without interrupting, but something had changed in his expression. It wasn't shock exactly. It was more like recalibration. When she finished, she said, "I should have told you earlier." "I was testing," he said. She stopped. "It's all right," he said, and his voice was even, which was in some ways worse than if he'd been angry. "I figured there was something. The car, He gestured vaguely at the house, at the specific kind of quality that was everywhere in it if you were paying attention. People with money usually don't try this hard to seem like they don't have it, unless they have a reason. She said, "I've had bad experiences." "I believe you," he said. "Gordon, I should go," he said. She didn't stop him. She'd known, somewhere in the part of herself she didn't consult often enough, that this was a possible outcome. She just hadn't fully let herself believe it until she heard the front door close. She didn't call him. She had decided very deliberately that she would not call him. She called Agnes instead, who listened to the whole thing and then said, "Well, you did deceive him." Nora said she knew that. Agnes said, "Not that your reasons weren't real, but knowing you had real reasons doesn't mean he gets to skip the part where it hurts." Nora said she knew that too. 2 weeks passed. She threw herself into work with the focused energy of someone who has been reminded that work is reliable in a way people are not. She had a proposal due for a municipal broadband project in Winnipeg. She had a board meeting in Toronto. She had 11 employees who depended on her to stay sharp, and she stayed sharp. She did not let herself look at her phone more than necessary. On a Wednesday evening, her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. "Hi," said a voice she didn't know. "Is this Nora?" "Nora Ashby?" She said yes. "This is Owen," the voice said, "Gordon Calloway's son." She sat down slowly on the edge of the couch. "Owen," she said. "Yeah." A pause. "Sorry for just calling like this. I got your number from..." I shouldn't say how I got your number. But another pause. She heard him breathing, heard the specific texture of a 17-year-old trying to organize something important. "My dad doesn't know I'm calling," she said. "Okay, he's been kind of not right since he stopped seeing you," Owen said. "I don't. He doesn't tell me stuff usually. But I can tell. He gets up in the middle of the night and he sits in the kitchen and he doesn't do that. He used to do that after my mom left, so..." Nora held the phone and said nothing. "I don't know what happened between you," Owen said. "I don't need to. But I think he liked you more than he's let himself like anyone since then. And I just thought someone should say it, because he definitely won't." She asked, "How are you, Owen?" A brief silence. "I'm okay," he said, with the emphasis of someone who means better than I was. "I have good days and bad days. He's always there for the bad days. I just thought maybe someone should be there for his." She said, "Thank you for calling me," he said. "Yeah," and hung up in the abrupt way of teenagers who have said what they came to say. Nora sat in her kitchen for a long time. She went to his house on a Saturday morning. She had his address from a card he'd given her months ago with his phone number on it. A plain white card, no title, just Gordon Calloway and a number. She'd kept it in her wallet without entirely knowing why. The house was in Westboro, a narrow 2-story on a street of similar houses with a maple in the front yard that was just beginning to bud. His car, a 9-year-old Highlander, was in the driveway. She sat across the street for a moment and looked at the house and thought about what she wanted to say. She got out of the car. He answered the door in a flannel shirt and reading glasses, holding a coffee mug. He looked at her without speaking for a moment, and then he stepped back from the door, which she understood as an invitation. His kitchen was warm and cluttered in the specific way of a house that is actually lived in. A backpack dropped in the corner, a bowl of fruit going slightly past ripe on the counter, a whiteboard on the wall with what looked like a grocery list and also a reminder, Owen, dentist, April 29. She noticed all of it because she was nervous, and nervousness had always made her notice small things. She said, "I'm not here to make excuses." He was leaning against the counter with his coffee, watching her. "I had real reasons," she said, "for doing it the way I did it. But having real reasons doesn't make it the right thing. I wasn't honest with you, and you deserved honest." She paused. "I think you already know that I'm—" She stopped herself. "I think you already know more about me than most people figure out in twice the time. And I think that scared me, and instead of being brave about it, I built a system. I'm good at systems." He didn't say anything. "I am sorry," she said. "Not for the reasons I was cautious, but for the way I went about it. You should have known who you were sitting across from. That wasn't fair to you." A long silence. Then Gordon said, "I knew you were lying about something." She blinked. "The car thing, the being careful. People who are just regular comfortable don't have that specific kind of careful. I wasn't sure what it was." He paused. "I didn't push because I thought, if she's not ready to tell me, I'd rather wait than make her feel like she has to." Nora stared at him. "That's not," she started. "That's not what most people would do. Most people," he said, "spend a lot of energy trying to get information they haven't been offered yet." "I've never seen the point," she said. "I don't know what to do with you." He looked at her for a moment. "You could start," he said, "by sitting down." She sat down at his kitchen table. He refilled his coffee and poured one for her without asking. He'd learned by now how she took it, and set it in front of her, and sat down across from her. The morning light came in through the kitchen window. Somewhere upstairs she heard what might have been Owen moving around. "I should tell you something too," Gordon said. She waited. "The investment work," he said. He was looking at his coffee cup, running his thumb along the handle. "It's a bit more than I made it sound. I sold a technology firm in 2019. Before that, I ran it for 16 years. The sale was significant." He glanced up at her. "I didn't mention it because I've found that when people know, it changes the way they talk to me. I prefer conversations where that's not in the room." She looked at him. He looked at her. The symmetry of it was so precise that she almost laughed, and then she did laugh quietly, more at herself than anything else, and after a moment Gordon's expression shifted into something that was not quite a smile but was in the neighborhood. "So," Nora said. "So," Gordon said. "We were both," she said. "Yes," he said. Outside, the maple in the front yard moved in the April wind. Upstairs, Owen's footsteps crossed the floor. "I'd like to try again," Nora said, "if you want to. No systems this time." Gordon looked at her for a long moment, the particular look of a man who has learned the hard way not to decide things too quickly. "I'd want to go slowly," he said. "I'm good at that," she said, which was not entirely true, but she was willing to learn. He nodded once, and reached for his coffee, and she reached for hers, and they sat in the warm kitchen in the ordinary Saturday morning light, and it was not a dramatic thing, the beginning of something real. It rarely is. It was just two careful people having finally run out of reasons to be careful with each other.